Hello and welcome to an episode of Flying High with Flutter. I'm your host, Alan Wyma. Today I'm with, we were such a rush this morning, I forgot to ask how to say your last name, Justin. So, Justin Shepertycki, is that right?
That's pretty good. I'm rather impressed. It's Shepertycki.
Shepertycki, and Michael Dryden. Hopefully, I think I got that one right. These two gentlemen over here are creators of a framework called Empire, which is, I think you said, heavily inspired by MVVM, right?
Yeah, it started kind of as an MVVM approach to state management and kind of evolved into something not exactly like MVVM anymore, but that's where its roots are, I guess.
Yeah, why don't we kind of like go back to your history, right? It's always good to hear about somebody's history to figure out where it came from. I think you guys mentioned that you were, at least Justin was working on Windows platform before, right?
Yeah, I think I've been on a lot of platforms. I think Mike and I have been kind of all over the map here, but yeah, we've done Windows development, native mobile development. We've done web apps, kind of you name it. Mike and I, both kind of come from similar backgrounds, at least over the last, 4 or 5 years. We've had the opportunity to work in a bunch of different technologies. So yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I started out my career as a .NET developer, and then when I joined the company that Justin and I previously both worked for, kind of dived into more mobile development and some cloud-related stuff, branched out on things, and then I followed him to another job. So we work together at a different company now, and we're using Flutter as one of our primary projects there.
Now, coming from Windows platform, why not look at Xamarin or something else that's using a C#?
We did, at a previous company, we did use Xamarin for one of our major mobile applications, and in all honesty, it was fine. It was a functioning app. We delivered something that we needed to the client, and it was fine. When Flutter ended up coming on the scene, it was kind of like, hey guys, let's take a look at this new thing here. We've always, at the time we were interested in cross-platform support. We didn't want to build apps for Android and a separate app for iOS, right? So it was intriguing to us, and that's kind of what led us there.
And I don't think anybody was particularly enamored with the development experience with Xamarin back then. It was a bit awkward, especially the deployment stuff. So we never got to. We actually were only using Xamarin for. I don't think we were using it on Android, were we? It was just iOS.
That's right. Yeah.
So we never even really took advantage of it.
I don't think it had auto reload back then.
Maybe not.
Reload.
It was a long time. We're a bit old.
Yeah, I remember developing locally for iOS, and like I'd click the play button, it'd come up, and just before it would come up, like done compiling, I was like, oh crap, I forgot this, and then I have to click stop and then go back. This is super annoying. Yeah. I didn't know. Actually, Xamarin actually had hot code reload. I think nearly all of them have it. I think even iOS may have it by now. No, with Swift UI.
Yeah, I think Swift UI would. I know Xamarin does for sure by now. Although, I mean, it's been years since I've touched it, but yeah, I imagine they all do.
Yeah.
So when you guys went to this company, so the first job together, was that where you guys started working on Flutter for the first time?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Justin was the one that led the way for us there. He was kind of tasked to put together a proof of concept of an app that could replace our native Android app and our Swift app and our Xamarin app. We had 3 apps on the go in 3 different frameworks. And so we thought maybe we could all build it under one Flutter app. And that did eventually happen, actually. I think we retired all but one of those apps.
I mean, how did Flutter get underneath your radar then if you've been in, Microsoft land, as they call it, and you had existing Xamarin app, right?
Is it fair to say that our boss didn't like Microsoft very much?
It's not uncommon. That's my usual reply.
We worked in .NET, but it was reluctantly to a certain extent, I suppose.
We were pretty heavily invested in the Google ecosystem as well for pretty much everything else. So, having Flutter land on our radar was bound to happen at some point. So,
yeah, but was there ever concern? I mean, Microsoft products are necessarily the best. They're kind of somewhat stable, I think. Google, I think there's even now people are still talking like, hey, maybe Flutter someday will be killed because it's Google. Was it ever like on your radar? Like, maybe we got to be careful about this.
Yeah,
it was. Like we actually had that exact conversation multiple times. Like you said, Google has a history of saying, this isn't the numbers aren't what we want. Yeah, we're just gonna kill it. I think what kind of, at least for me, made me feel a little bit more comfortable on the Flutter side is because a lot of people don't realize that, the language behind it, Dart, has been around for ages, right? It's been around since before Flutter was even popular. It's been used internally at Dart for a really long, or at Google for a really long time. So this wasn't, at least to me, this kind of fleeting thing because, I could have been wrong, but I had no expectation that, hey, Dart was going to go away, Flutter was going to go away. I think it was pretty heavily invested in. So,
I mean, for me, like, Dart was always like, why the heck do we have this language? And it just compiled down to JavaScript when I heard about it. So I was like, why don't we just write JavaScript? And actually, I don't even remember when the heck that was, but I was a big fan of CoffeeScript. And then when CoffeeScript kind of went away, we had ES6, and I was just like, all right, why? I learned my lesson from CoffeeScript. No longer am I writing in something that's not JavaScript if it's going to compile to JavaScript. So Dart was just like, what is the point of this language? Why is this language?
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I think the appeal was greater than the risk for us at that point. We had a client that was willing to foot the bill on it, and so we dove in. There was a lot of value. Actually, the switch over to Flutter was a very valuable one, I think, for that application. It standardized a lot of our development process.
And the transition over, to Flutter, I guess it's more of a Dart thing, was trivial. Being in most of the stuff we were writing up until that point was a lot of C#. And, you can definitely tell the similarities, at least in terms of syntax, right, between C# and Dart. The transition was fairly easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. Because I don't know about you guys, like, to me, Dart is so similar to like a mix of JavaScript and Java. If that even makes sense. Does it?
Yeah.
Usually people actually get confused between those two just based on the name, but now they get confused when you look at Dart, right? It's just so similar.
Yeah.
You guys put it on your machine to check it out, right? You turn it on, like, were you blown away or just like, okay, maybe this is good? Or, what was kind of the thought when you started playing with it?
I had done, a fair, I don't want to say a lot, but enough development, native Android development, before using Flutter. And let me tell you, it was not my favorite thing in the world. It was, dealing the native Android. Yeah. Doing native Android stuff. It was, to me, it was painful. It was painful. I was writing something in Kotlin, which Kotlin itself, I actually don't mind. But the whole, the XML based UIs dealing with activities and stuff in Android, like I couldn't stand it. I was not having a great time. So for me, switching over to Flutter, and booting up my first app and having things, doing that declarative type UI in code, to me was just it was a godsend. It was one of the kind of like eureka aha moments for me when I started using it. I was like, this is what I need. This is what I need to use. This is what I need to get good at. But really, to me, hasn't been a technology that I, have really got behind like I have with Flutter. I mean, Michael attests to my obsession with it. So it's had a major impact on the direction of my career and what I've learned over the last few years, for sure.
And Michael, what was your kind of feedback when you've seen it? I mean, it sounds like you don't write a lot of Flutter yourself.
Well, I do. Justin's the one that usually kind of spins up the projects. I contribute more on the Flutter projects. I contribute more as just an extra body.
Oh, come on.
I'm comfortable in it, but spinning up a brand new project isn't something that I've had to do yet. I do not share Justin's love of the declarative UI. I grew up learning, I know HTML and JavaScript and CSS really well. And so, he and I have a kind of a running back and forth with where we see the value of Flutter. And for me, Flutter Web doesn't fit into the pattern. I think it's great as a multi-platform, cross-platform, mobile development alternative to Electron. Personally, I wouldn't choose it over something else on a web application, especially because I think that the UI tends to not be compatible very well between them, right? Like if you build a Windows app, it's fine as a Linux app. If you build an Android app, it's fine as an iOS app. But web apps need to be responsive and it's just kind of a different thing. I can't even really picture what a cross-platform web and something else application would look like. But I'd be happy to be corrected on that. But my take is that I just don't see it right now personally, even though I work in it every day.
No, I think that's a fair criticism, right? I mean, there has to be some kind of, they also have that expression, no silver bullet, right? There's no way Flutter can be great for everything. We talked a little bit before the show, right?
Mhm.
Like, I like to bring on people from other technologies too once in a while and just talk about, okay, why do you like your stuff and what's good about it, what's not good. I think the only framework that I'm really not interested in is KVVM, or is it called KVVM?
That one, I don't know that one.
I think it's called KVVM. I might get the acronym wrong, but it's basically Kotlin or KMMV, maybe KMV, Kotlin multi-platform.
Yeah.
Have you heard that one before?
Yeah. The acronym didn't ring a bell, but yeah, I know.
Probably because I got the acronym wrong, I think. But I like the idea of it, like that you can write Kotlin for both, and you can compile it to native code. Like, okay, sounds like a copy on kind of Dart where you can compile to native. But anyways, I'm sure there's other things that do it. But the other thing too is the thing that I don't get is like, the whole thing is about the UI. The UI is the most, to me, it takes the longest time to do. And that's the one thing that they don't focus on that I understand from I think it's called KVVM or KM, whatever, from the Kotlin multi-platform, right? Is that you have to still build everyone separately in your own native toolkit, which I think is insane.
Yeah. I think the Kotlin community is also, they've grown a ton over the last few years. So I mean, there's some pretty serious Kotlin fanboys out there. So I think them building like JetBrains building on that, and something for that community is probably in their best interest as a business, right? So, but I'm with you. I find it interesting, but I'm not interested.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, because the UI is the biggest one, right? I mean, that's the way I could see it. I mean, worst cases, you can write C and you can compile, you could do it in other things. I don't understand why I got to do it in Kotlin, but I guess Kotlin's probably better than C and some other ones.
Yeah, Kotlin's kind of a nifty language. Is my limited experience with it. It's got a lot of neat features that other languages don't. But I don't know, it's built on Java, so it's got a shaky foundation.
Well, the best part about that is most people come from Android background if they're going to be getting into this kind of stuff, right? So it just makes more sense to get into Kotlin and do it like that. And I think Kotlin is very similar with how Dart became now with like the null safety. Like they have that, and same with Swift. Like everybody's going in that direction these days.
Yeah.
That was actually probably one of my favorite things working with Kotlin, because was the null safety. Actually, their kind of functional type stuff was interesting too. I actually really enjoy Kotlin as a language. I do. We tried to use it at a project recently at our company, and I think Mike wanted to drop kick me. So
yeah, it was such a small project; it didn't make sense to be trying to learn on the spot. So we got it done and moved on. But it was interesting, and I would revisit it.
You didn't try to whip out some Clojure instead, because that's like the other big one running JVM.
Yeah, let's do it.
And then if you're going to be pulling in Clojure, you might as well pull in Datomic at this point, because they go one and the same always.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always kind of interested to pick up the Clojure. I heard so many good things about Clojure, but once I see those parentheses, I just my eyes go nuts, and I'm like, how the heck do I read this thing? Like, I know when you start getting into it, you can read it,
Yeah.
But initially it's like, and I heard that you have to learn Emacs if you want to write Clojure in Lisp, because it's just the editor for it.
Yeah, I'm out. Although I had that same feeling the first time I looked at Go. When I looked at that syntax, I'm like, what is this?
I still have that feeling when I look at Go.
Yeah, that's not awful.
I'm always surprised at how much Go just gets out of the way, but it still looks really ugly to me.
Go, yeah. The only thing about Go that drives me nuts is when I was doing web apps with Go, you always have to go from byte array to string to byte array, just in one function call that you just keep flipping back and forth. I'm like, this is ridiculous. Just choose one. I don't care which one, and then convert it to the last moment. This is nuts.
It makes you very aware of what you're doing.
Oh yeah, I aware that I'm flopping between the two, even though they're about the same from what I understand. So I'm like, this is nuts. But the cool part I like about Go is the multi platform compilation, where you can be on Mac and you can produce binaries for whatever you want. That's the coolest part about Go, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
As somebody who kind of leads a team or has led teams before, I think what intrigues me about Go is how strict it is. Like you can be pretty confident that when you ask somebody to write something in Go, it's going to come out a specific way, because there's kind of just like one way to do stuff. The formatter is strict, compile unused variables or compile errors and those kinds of things. Like it really forces you to write clean code. And if you're on a team of people, I can definitely see the appeal of that. Again, it's not the language that I reach for first, but it's an interesting tool to have. I do enjoy working in it a little bit.
For me, there's two ways to write Go. One is where you check the errors, and the other one is where you don't check the errors, and you just keep going. Two ways I know to write Go.
Yeah, you really have to work on the error handling, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's why I like what Rust does a little bit more, where it's like that you actually have to deal with it all the time. Go, it's like, I don't know, you see a lot of these like simple examples, and it's not going to fail, but someday it may fail, and then you'd have no idea what's going on, I think.
Yeah.
How do you feel about Rust? It's on my bucket list for the next 12 months. Like, what's your take on it? I'm curious.
Yeah, so I did use it in production once. It was really fun. So I was processing I think I talked about this many times on here, but I was processing I don't know, like a couple thousand XML files, and I was creating PHP files, which is really weird, but that's the project.
Okay.
I did everything in Elixir, and so the reason I did that is because I could just process every single one concurrently, right?
Yeah.
Because sometimes you're waiting for something to download, so you just hand it off to native thread. So it just made more sense to do it that way. And then, but the processing of the files was difficult because I had to use XPath to pull out certain things from his XML files, because they're giant, right? These are coming from like an ERP system for an MNC. And it took like 10 or 20 minutes to do. And I switched to Rust for all the processing, and it took like 10 seconds.
Wow.
So it was really very nice, and so super efficient, obviously. And I didn't really have any errors, right? Because it forces you to declare errors, or sorry, to handle all the errors, right? But the one thing that was a little bit shocking was like it just like, I think Go will also warn you, right, if you don't handle errors and stuff, unless you use like an underscore, I think.
Yeah.
So they give you these things initially, but then they also have something called Clippy, which is like a linter. And so everything was running fine, and I'm like, let's just run Clippy. I just heard about Clippy because I'm still learning Rust at the time. And I ran Clippy, and there was so many of these like warnings. I was like, Jesus, this is horrible. I was a little bit surprised, right? But after going through it, and then like all the stuff that they gave me, like it's a super helpful language. Like I think there's nearly all positives. It's like super helpful. Like whenever there's an error, they give you like an error code that you can Google on, along with a definition, explanation in just plain simple English.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes it should give you links too. Clippy is super awesome to check out. It's basically around as fast as C. After a while, how fast you really need, unless you're making games or something really ridiculous. And they force you to handle all the stuff with these union types, and I think it's just like all positives. The only thing that's negative is just it's a totally different language, right? And they do have multi-platform support, but it's not as robust as Go's is. That one is just amazing. And I think a big plus is like everybody I think has a respect for Linus, right? And if the fact that this is the only language besides C that he's willing to consider, I think that has some weight to it, right? And even I don't know enough about why he said that and why he thinks that.
I saw today that there's going to be Rust code in the next Linux kernel.
I saw that too,
or something like that.
Only for drivers though, and that's fine, right? I don't think you should rewrite everything in Rust. Like there's some people who do say that it'd be fun, but it'll take you a long time because there's a lot of stuff in there.
I think that's the thing that's kind of been holding me back from really diving into Rust is I haven't, at least, during the day at my day job, found a real reason to choose Rust. Like I understand the pros, the pros of it, but I guess there really hasn't for me been a use case like you just explained in your example about having to do this high level of processing on large files, but just haven't come across it. So I'm glad that was your example, because that kind of reinforces to me that I haven't just ignored it. I just really haven't found the use case for it yet. Yeah,
like I've had a couple of people ask me like to do stuff in Rust, and like, what's your experience? I'm like, well, production experience, I just have one thing. And this was the use case. It wasn't 100% Rust, but I used it where I thought it could be used. And I actually was freaking out too, because I was still kind of learning Rust, and so it's a huge risk on my part. The project was obviously a big risk. It wasn't, and I actually did a significant amount of benchmarking to make sure I was in the right place. And I was like, this is like, 100x or something, whatever it was.
Yeah.
I was like, this makes sense. And even after I put it in production, I was like freaking out, like, because again, this is like totally new technology. I don't know what's going to happen. Because it's one thing to try it locally, another thing, to have it running and, somebody else's machine, and they're an MNC, right? So if it goes down, you're going to be up on Twitter the next day.
Yeah.
It was like processing pages for the website. So they put all their products into this ERP, and they wanted to generate web pages for it. But that takes like a couple of years for them to do it automatically on their side. So they need something interim. So they asked me to help them out with that. And yeah, so that's the scary part, and good thing they had a staging environment that we could check it out on, and went into production. It was the only thing that freaked them out is like the CPU usage was like going nuts for like 10 seconds and went back down. So their IT guys were like, dude, did we just get hacked or somebody just crypto mined us or something? What happened? Because have you guys heard of Elixir before? I know we talked about quite a few times.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so it just uses up all your cores, and it uses it as much as it can, right, to get everything done. And so it just like 400% because every single core, and then went back down, and the guys were just like, what's going on? And they were freaking out. Yeah, exactly. I mean, trust me, because actually I also had to went up to like 4 gigs of RAM too. And then when I did that with Rust, I think it went down to like 20 or 40 megabytes of RAM. So it's a huge difference, right? Because you're not holding on to all this, waiting for the garbage collector to let go.
That's right.
Yeah. So, but I mean, I love to talk about languages, you can see, but I think we gotta get back to the main topic, right? So you're working around with Flutter. What was your guys' like first kind of state management solution? I guess probably the first one's probably just stateful widget, right?
I don't think we stayed with stateful widget very long, Justin. I think your proof of concept immediately turned up that like we can't use this for a big app. There's no way. We talked at length this afternoon about what we should say in this podcast, and we were like, should we name names? What if like we don't want to make anybody feel like we hated this and that's why we created Empire or anything. But yeah, the first one I think we have the most experience with is Block. And it did a lot for us, that app. It did a lot of heavy lifting in that app for us. Far as I know, we've left the company. As far as we know, it's still in use there as well. So, yeah, Block is what we used at first.
And to be fair, that's what we've been using until Empire, until a couple of months ago. Yeah, was Block. I haven't dabbled a whole. I know there's like 45 at least other state management solutions out there, but I will say Block got us to, I would say, where we are, and it was fantastic. We just found that as we were working on our most recent project, that we had some things that we didn't particularly like about our code base, which led us down this path of how can we solve this, like what can we do to help solution our internal issue. And that's kind of where we started with Empire.
So what was your problem with Block? Because to me, Block works pretty well. The other thing that's annoying is like when you want to use the same block across like another screen, you have to move that state up. And that's the problem of Provider, because I use Flutter Block, at least. I'm guessing you guys probably use the same thing, right?
I think we found it was a combination of boilerplate.
Yep.
You spin up a new view, you need your list of states, you need your block, you need your view. And then and your events. You need your events too. And also the application level state we found kind of difficult to work with. Who knows? Maybe we were doing it wrong, but it seemed like at times we were tripping over. There's a user that's logged in, and it's right at the top level of the app, and he needs to be accessible to all of the different screens throughout the app, and you're always trying to go and get that context, get that block provider of, and we just kind of started to feel like it was a bit of a burden when we wanted to add to the application or refactor the application. We started looking at other options and decided on our own.
So which options did you take a look at, and how come they were not a good fit? I'm guessing RiverPod is probably an option, right? Because that's always high up on everybody's list.
Yeah, RiverPod for sure. Like I haven't used RiverPod in any of our in our production apps. We have dove into it, and it looks great. It does. I think Empire for us really started as I think a little bit of a learning opportunity for us as well to to kind of see what could we do, what do we really like about all these different little things, and how can we make a really focused package that solves the exact problem that we have. And that problem was a velocity, speed of being able to quickly add new views, managing new states and all that kind of stuff. Like, it was like Mike already alluded to, was as I'm writing an app, honestly, I don't want to have to worry about state. I don't want to have to worry about I need this particular thing in my widget tree to be able to react to states. I don't want to have to worry about any of that stuff. I want to have some properties that I have with some data that I care about, and I want it to change, and I want my UI to just change for me. I don't want to have to do anything particularly special for that.
I think that a lot of the packages, and I could be speaking out of turn here because I certainly did not investigate all of the packages, but I think a lot of them take a kind of a state machine type approach to state, right? Like you got your predefined set of states that your application can be in, and there are transitions between those states. And that didn't feel like a fit for what we wanted, how we wanted to work, or what we were after in our applications. And so, after kind of skimming through the high level items, nothing really grabbed us, and we said, well, let's see what we can do. And I think part of us thought it might not go past a little bit of dabbling, and then it turned out it was like, hey, actually this works pretty good. So we refined it a little bit from there.
I mean, how do you even architect something like this? Because I think the big question is, how do you even start to build this? Because to me, these things are all magic. I know obviously they're not really magic. If you start, I'm guessing maybe the first thing you did was start opening up packages and seeing how the heck they work, and then you start to figure out what are the basic building blocks to make a state management, right?
Yeah, like I've over the years have definitely dove into block and its source code, and I mean, honestly, what those guys have done is magic. Block definitely does a lot more than Empire does.
Way more,
right? And our goal is not to really. Honestly, our goal is not to say, hey, like we want to be the replacement for all state management stuff. That's not our goal at all. But how we got started, just digging into some code. I kind of had a fairly good idea how these works. I've dug into Flutter, lots of Flutter source code, and so I mean, it wasn't kind of going in blind. I had an idea of what I wanted it to look like from a code architectural level.
Yeah, it kind of started with a conversation where I think I kind of said, how come it's always so hard? and keep in mind, I'm not the expert. Justin is very strong in Flutter, and I am an intermediate maybe in Flutter. And so, for me, the level of bringing things in was challenging. And I've worked in lots of different frameworks, web frameworks, application frameworks, and I have kind of consistently complained since the start that state management in Flutter is harder than it should be. And maybe that's unfair. Maybe I'm just slow. But it's always felt a bit more challenging. And, I was also somebody who was responsible for junior developers and bringing them in. And I felt like there was a steep learning curve for a lot of them as well to understand, all the parts that move in a Flutter app. And so we kind of started this brainstorm session of like, in a perfect world, what would it be like to work with the properties? Could we make just properties that just were reactive? Like when you change them, they just change. If you have any experience with original like AngularJS or Vue or something like that, where it's just like, it feels like magic. You change a property and it changes on the screen, and it's like, could we do that? And then Justin figured out how to do that. So it was kind of went from there. Then we worked on the patterns to try and improve the developer experience from there.
Isn't Redux very similar to this style though?
So Redux is kind of based off of React state pattern, right? So it wouldn't surprise me. I can't say that we looked deeply into Redux. My strongest application framework is Vue. And so Vuex, which I think is based off of Redux, is it was kind of the inspiration from my perspective of like, I'd like this to act similar to how that stuff works. So maybe we need to look deeper at Redux, see if there's items we need to borrow, or if we just, cribbed it all from them by accident.
Because I could have sworn that like Redux has got something similar where it's like you just change a property and everything that's listening to it will just change. I mean, that's this value notifier, I believe, right? Or change notifier.
Change notifier. Yeah, exactly. It is like there's not, and like to Mike's point, like I said, there's 40. We never claimed that we didn't possibly reinvent the wheel because maybe we did. Like I mentioned earlier as well, like we built something that worked for us internally. Again, we kind of treated this at first as kind of, hey, this is a cool learning experience, and it really helped us, I think, understand what some of these other libraries are doing underneath the hood. And at the end of the day, I think our expectation for this was not to be this big popular package or anything. At the end of the day, if Mike and I came away with a better understanding of how some of these things work, and there was absolute value in that.
Yeah, and if there was something we could share back to the community, if it resonated with somebody else, then that's a win too, right?
Okay, so you got this mostly from working with web applications such as Vue, and so the idea is that what you would change the data. Like I'm just trying to understand, because when I think about what I have in my mind is like you change the data on some model and then like everything's listening to it and it'll start updating, but that's not the way MVVM works, which is kind of, I believe you said, is kind of the backbone of what you guys started off as, right? So maybe I need a little bit more explanation about how this works.
There's a reason we took MVVM off our documentation. Yeah, absolutely. You're right. I mean, that's why, like I said, we took it off. That was our kind of original design plan with Empire was to follow more of the MVVM thing, and we realized that it's not that.
Essentially, what we have is a view model and a set of properties. We call them Empire properties. Those are reactive. You initialize those Empire properties with a starting value. You can mutate those values, and you can use those values inside your widget. Justin could speak to the technical underpinnings of it. I think it's using streams to actually send the updates. And there's some optimization stuff available so that you can set multiple properties at a time without updating the UI multiple times. So maybe if you're setting 10 things in a row, maybe you don't want to update it until the very end. But at its simplest core, it's using this property in your widget and changing it in your view model.
I guess one of the things that I've enjoyed using Empire, and I've actually been using it in a side project of mine for the last little while, to mostly just to kind of test it out before we would release it. The thing I like that 90% of the time when I'm changing, anything that has to do with state, like I want the UI to change. I just want it to happen. I don't want to have to, say make a change and then, oh yeah, notify update or emit, my new states. Like I don't want to have to do that. I want to, because 90% of the time, that's what I just want it to do. The other 10% is maybe, like Mike said, I don't want to have to update the UI for whatever reason. I want to change my backing data here, but I don't necessarily want to update the UI on this property change, or I want to change a whole bunch of stuff and I want you to wait. And when that's all done changing, yeah, okay, go into your rebuild. With Empire, it's just change it. Assume you want it to update without having to think about it first. And then the 10% of the time, tell me you don't want to do that.
It just seems kind of weird to not update your state, but I guess there could be times where you want to group a bunch of changes at once and then trigger the update.
That's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of the only time is when you have a long running, say, asynchronous function that pulls a bunch of things down. Maybe you have a loading indicator going while you're doing that, and there's no value in updating it when the first thing comes back. You might as well just wait until they all come back. That's about the only time I think we use that in like one place in our app. So
All right. How far is this thing? Like, is it already production ready to go? I mean, have you guys put it into an app and released it?
it's in our company's app. So it's in production. It's been in production with us for
Yep.
what, 2 months
Yep.
or so now. We haven't called it 1.0 yet. We haven't completely convinced ourselves that we're not going to change the API in some weird way. We're trying. We think we're pretty close to not doing that, but thus far, I don't know, we're on like the 12th revision of it. So we're rapidly approaching a 1.0 release, I would say. We do think it's stable enough that you could use it, but just be aware that it's a 0-point release, and the contract could change a little bit.
Okay, makes sense. But also, the kind of nice part is that you guys control the API, so you can change it whenever you want, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and once we go to 1.0, we will try to treat it like any other stable project, right? We're not going to change it willy-nilly for no reason without warning or discussion with the community. As of right now, we don't have any real sense that anybody is using it heavily. It's a new release. We haven't gotten a lot of feedback from the community yet. So, we're making refinements that we think can make the language or the framework better while we have the opportunity to do that. But once we feel like it's in the right place, we'll call it 1.0, and we'll make a commitment to keep it as stable and as few non-breaking changes as possible.
Yeah.
Sorry, as few breaking changes. I said that wrong.
Yeah. The main thing for us is like mentioned is we are looking for a bit of feedback here. When how you found us, Alan, was Mike's post on Reddit there, and as we all know, Reddit is super polite and everyone's ultra kind. And but no, like seriously, when we put it up there, so we had some really candid feedback there. And I think to kind of pat ourselves on the back a little bit on this is we took some of that, we took it to heart. There were some things on there that we kind of took a step back. We're like, whoa, that was a little harsh, but they're right. And and we acted on it. And so, but ultimately it's put us into a better spot. I think Empire right now is in the best place it's been since we've done the initial release. And all the feedback that we can get, positive or negative is good by us.
I do think that the feedback on the whole from that Reddit post was quite good. I thought everybody was quite friendly, and there was some constructive criticism and a little bit of joking about adding another state management framework to the list. But it is what it is, and I think the criticism that Justin's referring to was the pattern that we initially settled on to initialize those properties was kind of not very fluttery and not very good. So we went back on that one, and that was a breaking change we made between 0.8 and 0.9. We revamped how that would work because we felt like there was a better approach. So now what we're doing is much like, was it Equatable that uses the props pattern? So it's much like that approach. You basically just pass in the properties.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think for some weird reason, the state management section has become, since you have the web background, the Node.js/JavaScript framework of the week kind of thing.
For sure.
I think it's not blowing up as much as JavaScript does, but at the same time, there's too many state management solutions, and it's kind of like, I think I compared this with the last podcast they were just talking about. When you go to a restaurant and the menu is huge, you're just like, oh man, I don't know which one I want. It's too many choices. So that's like the tricky part, right?
Yeah, I think that tells me that it's not quite a solved problem yet. And I'm not going to say that Empire has solved it. Maybe it's a step down the path, but it feels like the fact that people keep releasing state management means that not everything is resonating with every user. Either it's too hard, or it's incomplete, or it could just be that because Google has left it to the community to decide what state management should be, that we're forever doomed to have a dozen popular state management things. Who knows?
Well, I just kind of want to play a devil's advocate, right? We've been wearing clothes for hundreds of years, but every year fashion keeps changing and there's a new style all the time. Now, what does that mean, right? I mean, sometimes things just kind of fall out of favor, or you discover something new. I mean, it'll never be solved. It's just like how you think about the problem, right?
Yeah, maybe so. Or you just wear blue shirts for the rest of your life, like I do.
That's the only thing to do. Like, it's amazing out here. Like, I seen a whole group of guys. They're all IT. They're all wearing they're all wearing blue shirts and I think khakis, and it was just like obviously IT guys. It's very weird to see about 8 or 9 of them together. All of them really wearing the same style, not the same color blue, but the same style.
Got to reduce the daily decision fatigue.
Yeah, now you know why Mark Zuckerberg just wears the same stuff every single day, right? Just don't think about it too much. Just choose one state management and never think about it ever again. Okay. Actually, great is we do have a question from the audience, which is always good to hear. A guy named Paka is asking, does Empire avoid the problem that change notifier does in that it allows direct mutability?
Yeah. So if he's like, I have to know some context on the question. Like if he's asking if you can define an Empire property, let's say your backing value on an Empire property is an int and you want to directly, change the value of that int, then sure. Yeah, that works fine. I'd probably need to understand a little bit more of the context there, but the ability to change and update your values that your reactive values are really not a lot different than how you would change your regular int or add to a list or modify a date or any of those types of things. We've built in support for all the Dart types to be able to do that. So I hope that answers this question.
Yeah, I'm wondering if his question is, I'm not familiar with the problem that he's referring to either, but it sounded, my interpretation is he saying that it's possible to change the value of something in a change notifier without having that change be notified? Is that the issue, that you can mutate the value without triggering a rebuild? If that is the problem, I would say that Empire does solve that problem. It's not possible. You can opt in to making a change to a property without changing the state, but that's an optional parameter, and by default you can't do that by accident.
He's reiterating, saying that basically avoiding the problem that state can slip under our hands anywhere within the app can be quite dangerous. And then he says correct. So I guess there's always a delay, right? So maybe you must have answered his question already.
Okay. Yeah. I think you can opt into that behavior, but it's not the default behavior. And there would be, to my knowledge, no way to accidentally change the value of an Empire property without triggering the state change, unless you chose to do that on purpose.
So you can change the data without letting anybody know, so it doesn't rebuild, right? You talked about this earlier.
Yeah, there's a flag that you can pass when you change the value that would say do not notify, but it's false by default and totally optional. So you should know what you're doing if you set that flag.
Oh, this is the problem of not calling notify listeners, right? After you make a change. This is what he's talking about, right? Is that you have to call that?
Like if you wanted to make multiple changes?
No, what I'm understanding is, because I'm aware that there's like change notifier, value notifier. I never actually really used them too much, so I don't remember the names, but I remember there's one that you'd have to call notify listeners after every time you update the state.
Yes.
And then there's another one where once you update the state, it notifies everybody. Obviously, I go for the latter because I don't know, I may make a mistake or somebody else may make a mistake. So I guess he's talking about that particular problem, right?
That's right.
Yeah, I think we have avoided that problem. I think so.
Yeah, I'll just add it. You don't have to think about it. Like you don't have to say, notify that I've changed, or, like I believe that is change notifier that you have to explicitly say, notify I've changed. Empire will just do that for you.
Yeah, it's called notify, or hold on.
Notify change?
Change notifier, notifier listeners.
Yeah, that's it.
Change notifier is the name of the class, notify listeners. Yeah, I remember that. I always thought that was so stupid, but I don't know. I guess it makes sense if you're changing a lot of stuff. I mean, or you want to be explicit. Maybe
it would give you a performance advantage if you did need to make a bunch of changes at once, right? I suppose.
You would have to be doing some pretty heavy UI changes and updates. Like it's the same with Empire, right? Like you have the ability to hold off on a UI update after changing a bunch of stuff, but I don't imagine that that particular feature of Empire will be heavily or regularly used. Because you'd have to be doing some pretty heavy things to require that.
We tried to do some benchmarks of Empire last week in anticipation for this, just to make sure that, if you asked us a question like, is it slower or faster, that we had some kind of answer. And the answer is, we couldn't figure out how to test it because the 60 frames per second rebuild of Flutter was too slow to actually make any, like, it didn't matter what we did. We got the same numbers out of every benchmark because it was all about how fast Flutter would rebuild. If I'm saying that right, Justin, I think that's what we decided, right? We tried a bunch of different things.
We benched it against set state and made sure that we weren't worse, and we're not. That was our metric.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, like, our whole idea of like set multiple versus set them one by one, and in theory, set multiple should be faster. Didn't make any difference at all, at least in that contrived example, because again, I think we weren't doing enough work between Flutter rebuild cycles to make it be a difference anyway. We did not benchmark it against any other frameworks. That's not a can of worms that we want to open. Our goal is to be acceptable performance and call it a day.
Honestly, you guys remind me of a previous episode. So I also do episodes for a podcast for Rust. And I invited some guy on. He actually was the creator of Flask for Python.
Wow, yep.
He's now working with Rust at Sentry. And you know what Sentry does, right? They do all that metrics and bug collecting, etc. And I forgot what question I asked him, but his reply like literally blew me away. It was, he said something like, Python is so slow that no matter how much extra processing we do for checking of whatever, it doesn't make a difference. I was like, okay, that is both good and bad at the same time. It's very weird. So sorry, when you talk about benchmarking, I don't know why that came up in my mind. I was like, yeah, we talk about like, it was just, it's maybe slow, but it's still faster than what it needs to be, right?
It doesn't matter, right? Like at the end of the day, if you're fetching that new value from an API server, that part's so much slower than updating the Flutter UI that it doesn't matter. At least in theory, it doesn't.
Yeah, which also goes back to another point I made. Like, as long as it's fast enough that people don't complain and you're fine, you don't need to like be the most efficient, right? I'm sure there's lots of places in your code right now that you're like, oof, I really want to go back and rewrite this because this is not even ugly. This is just, I know this is just not performing. I know I could do it better, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, of course. The worst code you wrote is the code that you wrote last week, right? Like, or last year. You go digging into the stuff you've done before. Who wrote this? Oh, I did.
Perfection is the evil of good.
Oh, yeah. You're writing code comments and documentation, right?
Yeah.
There's tons of doc strings and comments in Empire for sure.
I used to work with a guy who was my manager who said, code, if you comment your code, it's a bad thing. That means your code is so bad that you can't figure out what it's doing. But this is the same guy who spent an entire morning figuring out why there's a bug, and he had to go back and reread all the code that he wrote because he didn't understand what it's doing to figure out the bug. So
I tend to fall in the camp.
That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, I tend to fall in the camp of explaining why code is written a certain way. Why this is weird or in this particular order. Not so much. The newbie thing was like, create a person, set the person's name, those useless comments that don't really tell you anything that you can't glean from the code. But there's certainly a place for comments, especially explaining complicated pieces of code that I have gone back and appreciated that I wrote something in the past.
And public APIs. Anything public, in my opinion,
yes,
needs to be well documented.
Well, I actually always hear about that in C libraries where like there's code in certain places and it looks really weird, and then they have a comment above it that says, "Don't remove this line."
Yeah.
Because then bad things will happen, and it's not clear what that line actually does. Like it's like a simple function call, and it's like, yeah, don't remove this line. Have you seen that before?
Yeah, you might think that you can optimize this code. In 5 hours you'll remember why. You should have listened to this comment.
And then sometimes it's like, who wrote this? And you're like, oh, that was me. Yeah, this kind of goes back to the code I wrote last week, right? Like, who the hell wrote this crap?
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay.
It's because it's harder to read code than it is to write code, I think. And so when you interpret code, it's like doesn't make as much sense as when it's coming out of your brain at that time.
Tell me about it. I have to review your PRs.
Awesome. No, I'm having fun talking with you guys about all this good stuff.
Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah.
Had a good time.
Yeah, I mean this is pretty cool. I mean, creator seems pretty interesting. I think someday I'll have to just go through and try all these state management things to see what the heck they're all about.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah, it'll take me forever, I think.
We'll like to think that this one wouldn't take that long to figure out and try. Some of them require a bit more of a learning investment, I think. I'm sure that they're worth it in many cases, but I think the startup time on an Empire project's pretty straightforward.
We've also recently just published an extension for VS Code to kind of help along with that. Just a snippets extension, just to kind of help you spin up some new Empire views and some view models. So that's an option for people if they want to try it out as well.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Cool. I don't think I have any more questions. Is there anything from you guys' side that you want to let people know about? Obviously, besides try creator, or sorry, not creator. I'm thinking about another episode to try out. What's my mind going crazy? I think I'm still not having enough coffee this morning.
Empire.
To try Empire. Yes, Empire.
Sorry. Is it morning where you are, Alan?
Yeah, it's 11 o'clock. I had a late podcast last night with MVVM, as we were talking about before the show.
So you're overseas somewhere, obviously.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep up the habit of waking up at 5:30 in the morning. So sleeping at 1, waking up at 5:30 for a couple of days in a row is not the best.
Yeah, it's 10 o'clock at night here. So, what just happened?
I have home automation in the house, so my kid wakes up, my lamp turns on. So, but the wife's got it. It's okay.
As far as other things we want to talk about, I mean, most of what we do, what Strive, our business, does is not something that's interesting to the audience for the most part. It's an enterprise type place. But we are trying to contribute back. We've got 2 projects so far that are open source. So we've got Empire, we've got a Python logging framework, which is even more reinventing the wheel than Empire probably. But it was more of a Python is one of our common backend languages, and this is just the default, spin up a logger in the way that we like to start logging stuff, implementation. So we're trying to give some of those things back and share with the community, and we welcome feedback and contributions. If anybody wants to, suggestions, issues, pull requests, happy to look at them. We actually did have a person contribute something really early in Empire. I forget what it was, something really, really small, but it's like a typo or something. But he made a pull request, and we reviewed it and accepted it.
So you guys, wait, you said that you have something that you can create a logger for in Python?
Yeah, I think it's just called Strive Logger is what I call the repository. It's on PyPI as well. It's just a very simple abstraction layer for logging, so you can have a common interface and you can implement a new, like a different logger implementations. 99% of the time I use it just as an abstraction for a Fast API, which is the backend framework that I prefer to work in when I'm working on APIs. Yeah, it's out there. We didn't make a Reddit post on that one though, because it was not very exciting.
You guys actually call it PyPI. I always call it Cheese Factory, right? Isn't that the actual name? Is Cheese Factory? Have you heard that before or no?
No, I haven't heard that one before.
No, because obviously Python. You know why it's called Python, right?
Maybe not.
It's kind of funny because I really hate Python for a lot of reasons. I think one of the ones is that I discovered that everybody has to have the same white space.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
So when you use Python, and that was a big problem for me when I first started getting into Python. But no, Python's called Python because of Monty Python.
Oh, I did know that. Yes.
Yeah, and so there's a skit called the Cheese Factory, and apparently that's what I've always known, like the Ruby gems of Python to be called Cheese Factory. I didn't know. I never actually heard somebody ever call it Pipey before.
They're called wheels, which now makes sense because they're
the WHL, right?
Wheels of cheese, I suppose. Yeah, I guess I never got the wheel reference before. But yeah, the packaging, like the equivalent to pub.dev for Python is PyPI. Yeah, Python is my go-to language if I just need to write something quickly. If I needed something performant, then I'd reach for something else. But 9 times out of 10, nice clean code is more important than performance for the stuff we're working on.
Yeah, definitely. And I know there's Python. Yeah, I just was never really into it. It was always kind of annoying to me. There's a lot of magic sometimes. Like with the decorators, etc. Sorry.
You probably have you heard of the Python sorry, the Flutter framework, Flet. There's a project underway in the Python community to basically create Flutter apps in Python. It's called Flet, Flet. Um, it's intriguing. I don't quite get it. Judging by the look on your face, you don't get it either. I don't personally. I think Dart is a very strong part of Flutter. I think the Dart language is really nice to work in. So switching it out for Python doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But
It looks off.
Yeah, I'm just wondering why would you want to do that? I mean, I like Flask, right? In terms of Flask is a really nice framework. I have yet played with the Fast API one. I've heard good things about it, but I haven't touched it yet.
yeah, Flask is very good.
Yeah, like you said, you can't write Flutter without Dart. It's just like that's what it's all about. That's what makes it strong. It's Dart itself.
I mean, partly it's a familiarity thing for some people, right? They don't want to learn a new language. I think that particular project, the long-term goals are to abstract multiple languages that to build into Flutter. So you could build it in Go or C#, I think, are on the roadmap for it as well. So it's just to keep you in the same language project, I suppose.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess you could do it. I mean, there's just bindings, right? But
Yeah.
didn't Unity have some language that was just like Python and they chucked it, right? So I can only just see this happening again.
I can't remember if it was Python or not. Unity, I haven't been in.
I think it was called Boo, and it
Yeah.
was based on Python, if I remember, or JavaScript. No, I don't remember which one. It's one of the two.
Yeah, I haven't been into Unity in a while. Because the last time I was in it, it was JavaScript, C#, or C#-ish. And then obviously your other C languages. But yeah, I haven't been in there in a while.
I mean, the stuff that drives me nuts about Python is like the double underscore methods or the dunder methods. It's like for len, for all these other things where you can. It just drives me nuts. It's like, oh, these are. I look at the constructor. I'm like, this is beautiful. What? This is so ugly. Like that double underscore in it. I'm like, this drives me nuts.
It's every language has its pros and cons. So the dunder methods are certainly not the nicest thing about Python, but things like list comprehension and dictionary comprehension are pretty slick.
Yeah, I agree. Those are really cool. Like when they brought those, that was brought into CoffeeScript. I thought that was really sweet. I give you that one. But sometimes when you import modules, though, code gets run, and that freaks me out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a whole project underway to try and avoid that. I don't know if it'll ever come to fruition or not. But
and the other thing too is for Python also, like they always say, there's only one way to do it. But I found sometimes there's multiple ways to do the same thing. I don't know like what happened, but I was like, what the heck is this? I know what it's doing, but that doesn't seem right because that's not how I would do it in Python.
The Zen of Python says that there should be one best way to do it. I don't know if that's always true or not, but
so you must have actually read the Zen, right? Where you can you go to Python and you can type this import this and you can see it come up.
yeah, a long time ago. I can't off the top of my head. I couldn't tell you what they are anymore, but I have read the Zen of Python.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah, I don't know. I hope Python sticks around for a while. It's still doing good things. So, but there's just too much weirdness about Python that freaks me out. But again, I like Flask. Yeah, list comprehensions are really sweet. Same with dictionary. And then they've been somewhat consistent, right? Other than that weird thing that happened between 2 and 3, but I think they learned their lesson after that one. I think.
Yeah, I don't think there'll ever be a revisit of that. It's been progressively really improving since 3.6, 3.7, I think is when it really got really strong, maybe even 3.5. Supposedly the one that's coming out in October, November is supposed to be something like 15 to 20 times faster for many different operations. There's been huge optimizations in, I think it's 3.11 that's coming out.
One last thing. Isn't there like a walrus operator or something I keep hearing about? Yeah, it's the colon with the equal sign. Can you tell me what the heck is the point of that? Because I looked at what it was.
I had to Google it the last time I heard somebody talking about it. It came out in 3.10, I think.
It's like a way that you can declare a variable, but it's...
Well, that's Go, right? It's like it's the same syntax.
No.
The same syntax
is
as...
it the same as Go?
Yeah, I think it's the same syntax as Go for initializing variables, I believe. I don't know what it does in Python.
It's similar. It also initializes.
Maybe assigns and checks. I'm not sure. I haven't had a need to use it at this point, so I haven't dabbled with it.
Okay, I was hoping to finally get down to it because I read it and I was like, this is just like I wouldn't do like that because it makes no sense. And then, but yeah, I don't know. I heard good things about it. There's actually an article where this guy who goes nuts about it. I heard about it in changelog, but
It looks like it lets you assign a value to a variable in the middle of another expression, which is kind of a weird thing to do, but I don't know why you would want to do that.
But it's there. It's a new feature.
yeah, until that one time when you did want to use it and you knew about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much for coming on and talking about Empire. It seems quite interesting, and I'm happy that you guys have moved forward. And it's good that your boss is guys letting you guys go off in this direction, right? Because it is a time sink, right, to work on something like this. I mean, I don't mean that in a negative way, but it does take a lot of time to get the fruits of it.
Yeah, I think fortunately we were able to kind of show that it's been effective for our velocity, and it's been a net gain for us to work on these on this kind of stuff. We've been able to build something that we can then reuse that provides value both to the company and, if we get a little bit back from the community or we can provide some to the community, then that's great too. But I think as pretty much with the case for almost every modern developer, we're all leaning on open source. There's open source is everywhere, and if you have a chance to give back, why not do that? It's not like you're going to make money off a state management solution.
That's right.
Oh no, you can find a way to do it, right? You can find a way to make money from that. Self-support, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And Red Hat made money from open source. They self-support.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way
I'm a developer, not a salesperson, so.
Yeah, but that'd be that's the only way to go, right? I think that's the big one. One of the questions you got to tick for enterprises is there support for it,
mm-hmm.
so they can feel better.
That's right. Yep. Yeah, no, thank you, Alan. I appreciate the invite and reaching out to us. It was pleasure to meet you, and have a chance to talk to your audience, about what we're building and stuff that we've are fairly passionate about, and yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, if anybody's interested in checking it out or reaching out to us, I don't know if Alan got our Twitter or GitHub on the invite there. Maybe we could share those, but the GitHub for Empire is a great way to get a hold of us too. We have the discussions tab turned on, so you can reach out to us that way or open an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to be sure to try to leave it into the notes. All right. Thank you again for coming on, and hopefully maybe you guys will be part of the Big Five or whatever they call that, the top state management solutions.
That's the dream. We're trying to get past 50% popularity on Pub.
All right. Thanks again.
All right.
Thanks very much, Alan.